Hello, Huyel, and thank you for writing to me. You have pointed out some phrases on the Trollbabe webpage, and I think I can explain a few things that will make it really easy to understand what's going on. First is that webpage is perhaps 10 years old, that I threw together just as placeholders that someday I would go in and write things in there that would make sense. So those are nothing but notes to myself. I never did it. They're just sitting there as notes. To my knowledge, nobody on this planet has ever visited that webpage and went to look at it to see what it says. So as far as I could tell, there was really no point in developing it. I don't really like my website very much and have always wanted to change anything anyway. Well, you have been the exception. You went and looked at it, which is amazing. And so I need to clarify that the way you wrote those in your email was as a string of words. Surprising, sex and sorcery, influence on other games. Well, those aren't in a string. Those are in three different lines because those are three different notes. And I can tell you what each one means. They're a little bit related, but not entirely. So the first one about surprising is that unlike every other game I had written until that point, which was Sorcerer and Elves as published games, but before that or during that same time, there were also the prototypes of what would eventually become Circle of Hands and several other interesting objects. One of them was called Fantasy for Real. Another one was called The Human Machine. Both of those have had pieces inserted into later games. Anyway, so I was working on a number of games at that point. But up until that moment of developing Trollbabe, all of those had been ambitions that had been in place for a very long time. I could trace my interest in doing something like Elves back many years in notebooks that go all the way back into the middle 1980s. I can trace the same thing for all of them. However, in the case of Trollbabe, it was a surprise that I had the idea. It was a surprise that I wanted to publish a game. At that point, I felt 100% satisfied with my publishing experiences and didn't really feel the need to publish any more role-playing games or to design them, except just for fun to throw up on a website. That was all. But out of almost nowhere, amazing, I felt the need to produce this game, and I felt I had the ideas for how to do it. And so I know it sounds like a joke that one day I sat straight up in my bed at night and said, Trollbabe, out of nowhere. It is true that I did that, actually. Well, it's not completely out of nowhere. The next line is relevant and it gives a little bit of context. At the time, I was working very hard on my publication of Sex and Sorcery, which was a little bit similar in that it had not been a planned Sorcerer supplement. Originally, I wrote Sorcerer, Sorcerer and Sword, and the Sorcerer's Soul almost simultaneously. The two supplements had come into existence through the process of playtesting the core game. Some of those ideas, in fact, particularly for Sword and Sorcery, predated the vision of the core game. So therefore, writing Sorcerer, Sorcerer and Sword, the Sorcerer's Soul, to me felt like it was finished. And then events intervened and it felt necessary to write Sex and Sorcery as well. Writing about sex and sorcery produced a lot of debate, a lot of controversy, and a lot of disagreements about sex and gender in role playing, particularly among the real people. So I was really thinking about those topics. And we were also playing a game called Hero Wars, which is set in Glorantha. And that game was very powerful for us at the table and involved some visual themes that I think you can kind of spot in Trollbabe as well. So the point is, there were some things going on in my head about female protagonists, about people playing in awareness of gender and sex, and also in terms of a perhaps magical or mystical approach to the topic with the Hero Wars game. So that's why the line sex and sorcery is there, is to remind me of the things I was working on at the time that may have influenced the spontaneous seeming surprising aspect of deciding and needing to do Trollbabe. As for influences on other games, that's its own topic. As I say, those are three effectively separate terms. And the most obvious example is Primetime Adventures. Another one is The Shadow of Yesterday. Primetime Adventures has continued through multiple editions and many translations. The Shadow of Yesterday less so, but The Shadow of Yesterday itself was tremendously influential upon other games. Trollbabe's influence on Dogs in the Vineyard is very, very strong. And I think that there's quite a few others. The afterword to the text of Trollbabe discusses this in some detail, and you can look up any other titles or principles of game design or presentation and things which found their way into games. A few years later, a famous game designer posted a joke that he kept trying to write a new role-playing game, and all he kept doing was writing Trollbabe again. And so at the time anyway, for a few years, it was acknowledged as a basically required reading for people working on games. As I say, more details about that are available in the text as it stands right now. Well, I hope that answers your question. I'm a little curious about the context for your question. If you want to continue the conversation, please feel free. Thank you.